Hello and welcome back to Wisdom in Action, the podcast where we explore what it takes to bridge the gap between knowing and doing, because that's where the real wisdom is born. I'm Ostra Putnanya, resilience coach and podcast strategist, and I created a space to have honest conversations with real experts and bring you practical insights you can apply, not just think about. Today, we're joined by Gillian Whitney, a business book coach, 5-time author, and podcast host who helps experts turn their knowledge into published books and visible authority. Gillian, welcome to Wisdom in Action.
Hello, and I'm excited to be here. This is so fun.
It is. To start us off, what is one piece of wisdom that changed everything once you started applying it?
Oh my goodness. Talk about starting with an easy question. I think the thing that I learned is that we are much more powerful than we think we are. And I think that we go through life kind of thinking, who am I? Who am I to do this? Where in reality, who are you not to do this? And once I learned that we don't have to wait until we're better to do something, we have more knowledge, we have more credentials, we have more experience. The little bit of knowledge that we have today is enough for somebody who is right behind you, ready to learn. So it's like when you're a runner and you do those relay races and you pass the baton. It's like someone's waiting to come and get the baton from you. So we are more powerful and more knowledgeable than we know.
Yes, that is what a wisdom or piece of wisdom that is. I literally had earlier today, I was on a walk with a call with a friend, and he would literally tell me exactly the same thing. He would tell me, like, stop overthinking, stop doubting yourself, just go and do the thing. and I am somebody who's been in self-development and mindset and everything for so long that it's still there, and it's still something that to be mindful of. It's affecting me to much lesser level, but I think it's something I have learned, especially in the last couple of months, the importance of having those people in your life that can quickly put things in perspective and remind you of things or kind of mirror back to you. Like for me, it would be a lot of like self-criticism and like kind of that not being good enoughness thing. And it would be very helpful to have people that can mirror back to me the good things that I would kind of just, oh, that's nothing. It doesn't count kind of thing. Because you focus on that like one tiny negative thing, or whatever is not perfect. And it's something that I find very interesting, kind of that importance of having, especially people that are like ahead of you that tell you like, just don't overthink it. Like we all are just figuring this out anyways, you know? And yeah, so it's very valuable piece of wisdom. How did you get to that realization?
I think just through the years of experience and seeing other people get ahead and recognizing that I'm the one holding myself back. And so, for instance, one of the things I love to talk about is because I'm a book coach now, because I finally wrote the book that I wanted to write that took me 21 years to write. And nobody was, holding me back but me. I was procrastinating. I had unfinished manuscripts. I had self-doubt and procrastination. And every year I would get to December and say, ugh, another year has gone by and I have not written that book. And then we go into January and I would have the best laid plans of mice and men, and another year would go by. And that's what happens, is that all of a sudden you realize I'm running out of years. Like years are going by. And, I'm spinning my wheels. And so it was finally when somebody, I think I was actually on a podcast and somebody said, oh, we'd love you to talk about what books influenced you and feel free to say your own, toot your own horn. I had no horn to toot. And it was just like, that crystallized for me. I would not do this again. That was like my kind of like wall I finally hit. And I said, I'm going to do it. But here was the big message. Set the bar lower than you think you should. You don't have to write the biggest book. You don't have to have the biggest business. And I'm not just talking about books. I'm talking about any goal in life. We aim so high that we can't do it. And so sometimes lower the goal achieve that goal and know it's like stairs. Then you'll get up the next one, the next one, the next one. And I think that that kind of held me back for so long. It was just like, oh, I have to write the best book ever, the biggest book, the bestseller, the this and the that. No, you can just do the smallest little thing, achieve it, and then move on to the next. And I think that for me helped me figure it out. Go for the small goal first, achieve it, and then move on.
Yeah, the best book ever, the biggest thing ever. It's what is up with that? I have why do we do that?
I don't know. It and it's against everything that we're actually taught. Like you said, we're both students of motivation and inspiration and growth, and we talked earlier today that we both done the fire walk with Tony Robbins. These are all things that you learned that you can accomplish. We're so powerful, and yet we think we have to be everything when we don't. We just have to be the best we can be at this particular moment in our life. And sometimes this is the best we can show up with whatever's going on in the planet, in the universe, in your life. This is all I can do right now. Maybe I could be something different in a year from now or 2 years from now, but who knows what other stuff I'm juggling. So this is what I can do now. And stop thinking we have to be all things. And like you said before, when you were talking about how sometimes we don't realize we know so much and we discount what we think. Like whatever we know, it's like not important. It's like, oh yeah, everybody knows that. No, they don't. You do. You think about you're a podcaster, all the skills that you needed to learn to become a podcaster. And now you help other people. Well, imagine if you discounted that skill, but you built it up because one day before, if we kind of look at the before picture, you knew nothing. You knew nothing. You showed up here and went, I wonder how you do a podcast. And you learned and you acquired skills. And yet how easy it would be for you to just go, anybody can do a podcast. I do this, this, and this. When in reality, no, it's because of all your experience that you can do it today.
That is it is very interesting, even like that, being the best versus being the best that you can be, and how it helps to shift that perspective. Because being the best, I don't even think if you can be the best if you're not the best that you can be, anyways.
Mm.
It does start with you at the end of the day. And I think that being the best that you can be, it invites more of that, or there's less of that comparison. Not that comparison is
Mm.
bad, but we don't always use it in a good way. We can use it to self-destruct and self-sabotage and actually like damage our progress, because then it's like, oh, look where that person is and I'm this many steps behind. These are things that I don't have, where instead of looking at it as inspiration, or something that, oh, they just show what's possible kind of thing. Um, how how to distinguish the two, or what would help to actually start focusing on being your best versus being the best?
Probably realizing comparing yourself to other people is just a terrible trap because we don't know where they are on their journey. I remember like Marie Forleo. She's somebody I love. I've followed for inspiration for years. If you go back and look at Marie Forleo's videos of when she started, she's sitting in a place with a radiator behind her, a crappy little apartment in New York. As opposed to now, she has a makeup crew and she has these perfect videos. So what do I compare myself to? Marie Forleo today or Marie Forleo to the past? Because I'm probably better than, where she was when she started. But when I started, I was terrible too. So we all go through those things. So I think we have to compare ourselves to our own journey and stop looking at other people's, because we don't know where they are on their journey. We only know where we are on our own journey. So I think that's the important thing, to always just say, look at other people for inspiration. Look at other people for ideas. But at the end of the day, we have to put those blinders on and just look at our own path. And where are you on that path? And if you are just 1 nano centimeter forward to where you were before, even if you're just facing forward and you're not even moving, that's a good thing. So
Just have a
just
direction.
have a direction, make and always have clarity of where you want to go, because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland, when she asked the Cheshire Cat, where do I go? And he says, where do you want to go? And she goes, I don't know. And he goes, well, then anywhere will get you there. So you have to be very clear. Where is it you want to go? Get that clarity first, and then say, am I moving in the right direction, or do I have to adjust my sails and start moving my boat in a different direction?
I actually wrote down a quote from what my friend said today. You're not living other people's lives, so you shouldn't care what they think about you.
Exactly. Exactly. Because the funny thing is, they're not thinking about what you're thinking about anyways. Like, we think everyone is, like, thinking about us, but they're not. They're thinking about themselves, which is always so funny when you do a video, or, you get up on stage and you're doing a presentation and you think, "Oh, everybody's judging me." And it's like, "No, they're not." They're sitting there just going, well, I hope this gets cracking because I've got a meeting to go to, or, I'm waiting for that phone call from my doctor. They're like in a different space, and they're watching you with their radio tuned into radio station WIFM. What's in it for me? That's what we're in our heads kind of going, what do you have to tell me? And this is important, whether you're doing a video, writing a book, posting on social media, making a podcast. People are always saying, what's in this for me? They're not thinking about you.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to get out of our heads and go and share it. Go and say it. With our stories, I think that's one of the things that I'm actually curious first to learn about your experience of writing your story, because a lot of it is also going through that story, reliving a lot of things. You start to see a lot of the things that you might have not noticed because you intentionally are paying attention to your story. What are some of the things that you learn about yourself when you were writing your book?
Mm, that stories matter. And one of the things that I learned writing my book is that going back and just saying, do I have some stories that illustrate my point? As opposed to just writing an instruction manual. And I used to be a tech writer. So it's very easy for me to say, okay, here's how you do something. Step one, step two, step three, step four. That's really easy. But the thing is that's hard as a reader to digest, because stories are sticky. And so if I can tell you a story, you'll likely remember the story more than if I just gave you the instructions. So here you talked about, you went, you met with your friend and you talked with your friend, and then you gave that. That's a story. And people could then go and hear that and say, oh, well, I was listening to this podcast and the podcaster was talking about this story about when she was talking with a friend. We're more likely to remember that. So I think that was the biggest thing that I learned with writing, is that if you want to figure out to write a book, look at your stories and how can those stories, how are they all related? And then what could this help other people? Because you're writing books for other people. You're not writing books for you. So how could that matter to the ideal reader of who I'm trying to reach? And I remember, I love Seth Godin. He is a marketer and he does fabulous presentations. And I love his books and I love everything about Seth Godin. He's like one of my idols. And I remember he said once, when I go to do a presentation, I don't go to PowerPoint. I don't even sit and figure out anything. I figure out what's my topic. And then I go back in my head and I say, what are 10 stories I have on this topic? And then I use those 10 stories to weave my presentation. So truly, if you want to, up your game with anything in life, go ahead and make a story inventory. Just sit down one day and just say, what happened to me in grade school? Why did I move from this country to another country? These are all different stories that you could record, and then just say, what's the lesson? Just story, lesson. And the next thing you know, you might say, there's some common themes here that I didn't even realize I had. And that's when we can say that knowledge then can be turned into a book.
Very interesting. I can relate to that example of writing down the stories and looking for lessons because I went through a program on personal branding, and there was quite extensive exercise on kind of identifying stories in your life. And initially you also think about like what's your avatar and things like that, which for me at the time it was me a couple of years ago. Kind of like whatever it is that I needed to hear, whatever I needed to learn, like I know what that is because I'm now like 5 years later. I know what she needed, kind of thing. At least that's where I am right now. Maybe in 5 years it will change. But but just to get to this point, I have the answer, and it was interesting because I would start to. I remember, and I was taking my time with it. I didn't rush it. I was sitting for quite a few hours, just sitting down, writing the stories, which also was quite tiresome because you
Mm,
also relive them and there's all the emotions that come with it
mm,
and all the internal that can come up. But it was interesting to write them out, and I was like, it put things in perspective because day to day we focus just on living and things that we need to get done and those things. But then when you look back, you put things in perspective because I would write those stories and I'm like, wow. And I then another comes up that I had forgotten and I'm like, I forgot about this. And then there's something else that comes up. And it literally ended up being like I would write them out and I would feel inspired by all the stories that I would write out by seeing them and seeing and being aware of, oh, I did this and I did that and I went through this and then there was something very powerful about it where it was an interesting kind of experience because a lot of times I think we think that, oh, my story is boring or whatever might be the case, and then once you actually start to kind of read your own story and you start to see it, it gives you a different perspective on your story, but also on yourself.
mm,
Because we have a lot of stories about ourselves that might not necessarily be true, or we haven't had a chance to put them in context or to
mm.
challenge them. Um, and through those experiences, I was able to see myself from different angle, but also I was like, I'm seeing that there's some things that I would assume about myself that based on these stories, I don't think they're true.
Agreed, agreed. That sometimes you really get insight into yourself by looking at the stories, and sometimes there's a story behind the story. Like, why did that even happen in the first place? And it's like, oh gosh, because I did this. That's why that happened. And then all of a sudden, it's like, chick, 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 chick. It all connects, and you're just like, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and I think it's the other thing that came in my mind was the getting to know yourself. That we live in a world where we're so distracted from ourselves. I always talk about that distinction that we might spend a lot of time by ourselves, but we don't spend a lot of time with ourselves, and there's a big
Mm,
difference. And even with that, we don't necessarily get to know ourselves. We a lot of times we look for answers externally. We don't really trust ourselves. And we don't take that space or that time to actually stop and even look at our stories, try to understand, or even inquire of, okay, I thought this is true about myself, but is it? Is it
mm,
actually true? Based on what? And kind of go through those conversations with ourselves and actually get to know ourselves. And a lot of the times we can do that through our story.
mm, mm. That's so true. And I love when you said, is that true about myself? Because I remember I'm a fan of Byron Katie, and she talks about sometimes we take a statement and then we should analyze it and say, is that really true? Or am I just thinking that's true? And who would I be if I didn't think that that was true? And you can really put something under analysis and recognize that it's like, I've been walking around with some really self limiting beliefs that if I let go of those, who could I be? What could happen in my life? And one thing I wanted to point out, you talked about just a second ago that writing down your stories was difficult. And it is for some of us. Some of us, we sit down with that paper and pad, pad and pen, and we can't write those stories. And that's why having this little digital device by us is awesome, because if you can't write out your stories, then speak your stories, and it accesses a different part of your brain. And it's like going into therapy almost, because you can start telling a story. And like you said, it will probably trigger another story. And if you just keep going, just keep talking into that phone, afterwards, you can take that and you can transcribe it and say, what was I really figuring out in this little, soliloquy I had with myself? And you might find out it's actually the third point. You thought it was the first point, but then the second point led to the third point, and that was the gem that you were looking for.
It's very interesting how little we know ourselves. It's it's fascinating to me because a lot of times we think I know exactly who I am. This is what I'm not good at. This is what I will never achieve. This is we have all these negative knows about ourselves. But at the same time, it's like a good example is me in marathon. For the longest time, that was my impossible. I didn't even consider anything long distance running because I was like, I can't run long distances. When I was in UK, I was in personal trainer courses and I made one person an Ironman program. And I remember thinking, oh, it would be nice if I could do it, but I can't run. And in there,
Mm,
like in Ironman, you finish with marathon. So I was like, I can't really do it. And it took me 7 years. I didn't even question doing it. Like there was no option. It's just not happening. And then 7 years later, I watched the movie Brittany Runs Marathon. And I had gone through enough
mm.
self-work and kind of working through my belief, challenging my beliefs, where I was like, well, if she can do it, maybe I can also do it. And right after I finished that movie, I found a program online, started to run the next day, and a couple of months later, I finished my first half marathon. And before I did it, I remember saying to my friend, well, if I finish this half marathon, now the half Ironman is a possibility because half marathon was the reason why I can't do it. And and a lot of through going through that journey, now like last year I finished my first marathon, the original Athens distance, Athens marathon, this like marathon distance in Athens. And and it's been an interesting journey to go through that because if that was my impossible and I just did it, what else do I think is impossible that actually isn't?
I love that. I love that. It's like it opens up your world, because we live in these really small containers about, oh, I could never do that. And it's like, well, says you actually, like I said before at the beginning, we're more powerful than we believe. We can do things. And sometimes we just need to do it scared and know that it's okay to be scared, because being scared actually just gives us energy and gives us motivation of like, okay, then I'm just going to have to work a little bit harder. And how listening to somebody else's story can inspire the next person. We always are paying it forward. And I love that. I love that.
Yeah, the stories are very interesting because when I was training for my half Ironman, I was filming the journey and kind of documenting it, posting about it. And it was interesting that after I finished, there were two people that messaged me that they want to sign up and do it themselves as well the next year. And one of them I know for sure that did it. And I remember thinking, oh, like I'm kind of just like posting for myself, and like all the stories that we have about our stories. I think that's another thing that we have. Um, and I remember thinking like, oh, like I'm kind of just doing it for myself. Maybe like some people can get inspired, but like I have very small channel, nobody really cares, the whole thing. Just to find out that two people get inspired to go and do it. And it's not a small feat. Like it takes quite a while to train up to be able to do that. And that's where it's something that I find fascinating of even like how the stories that we have can inspire others in their journeys or can resonate to them too. And I think that's the hardest thing to do is to have impact on somebody to the point where they actually do something.
Take action.
Yeah, it's not just an insight. It's not just like, ooh, interesting, new thought. They actually do something.
Yes. That and that to me is the ripple effect that it's like, you think when you drop a stone in the water and you see the ripples go out. And that's what happens with us. We sometimes say, okay, is anybody listening? Does it even matter if I wrote this book or if I did this post or I made this video or I talked about this on a podcast? You only have to just reach one person. And if that one person, like you said, is moved to now take action, who knows what their ripple effect is and that who they're reaching and if they reach one person and so on and so on and so on. And then all of a sudden you may never know that you did this, you made this one post that affected somebody and it's gone out in the world and created a chain reaction of affecting so many people. So I always think we should trust our intuition. And let me tell you a really interesting story. I'm working with a client right now who's in the process of moving abroad. She's leaving the United States and she's moving to Europe. And she's writing a book. And she said right now she's juggling so much with the visas and everything that she's going through. And then she said in an offhand remark, oh my gosh, there's probably a book in this. And so, but she's writing a different book right now. So I actually emailed her and I said to her, you know what? Whenever you say, I think there's a book in this, I said, there is. Or you wouldn't have been given that inspiration. You wouldn't have been given that thought. So I said, here's my suggestion to you. Pick up your phone and just start recording your journey and then squirrel it away. You're busy with what you're doing. You're busy writing your other book, but you're going to want all of those little tidbits that you're going through today because you're going to forget stuff. So just record things as they happen, the snafus and the this and the, oh, I got to get, shots for my dog because I'm bringing my dog with me. All those different stories, just record them and squirrel them away. And she said, oh my gosh, that's so brilliant. 2 days later, somebody else who's totally different, who's living abroad, said, I feel that I should be writing a book about how I moved from the United States to Europe and everything that I went through now that I'm living in Europe. So here's two people who they don't know each other. They just both know me and are both inspired to kind of write the same story. So it just goes to show you that if you have that, oh, there's probably a book in this. There probably is. So record those thoughts because even if you never do anything with it, if you decide to do something with it, you're going to be really happy you have those. And even if you don't do anything, you've got some great stories that you can use somewhere else in the future.
Yeah, it's very interesting, even when it comes to stories, how we connect through them, how powerful they are for us to actually connect. And connection is really all that, like, one of the main things that we all are looking for.
Absolutely.
It's something that I find fascinating. Even like communication is a big one as well. But there's something about stories that, especially, and I know most people don't like to hear that, stories when you're not perfect.
They're the best stories. They're the best stories.
The stories where you're human, and that's when people can actually resonate with you, connect with you. And it's very interesting that when we share those stories, we feel the most vulnerable, but actually people connect to those the most.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I know one of the highest posts in terms of comments on LinkedIn was the most vulnerable story I ever shared. And it was several years ago, there was a movement called This Little Girl Is Me. And we were encouraged to write a post about talking to our younger self. What would we say? And so my post was very vulnerable. I talked about needing books as a kid because of all the trauma that I was going through as a child. And that is my highest performing post on LinkedIn. And it was one of those posts that I wrote where I was sick to my stomach when I hit that post button because I went, this is so vulnerable. Is this okay to share this kind of information? I don't know. And then I just literally, I clicked post and then I shut my laptop and I went for a walk. And it blew up. Like lots and lots of people said, oh my gosh, thank you for sharing your stories. And people were also sending me DMs. And I remember one woman reached out to me and she said, books were my refuge as a kid too. And she actually went and created a post. And, the ripple effect was amazing. But being vulnerable, it's scary. And people, they recognize it. They're not cheering like, "Oh, yeah, you had a horrible childhood." It's not that. It's like they're recognizing, "Wow, I thought it was just me that had a horrible childhood. I thought it was just me that needed to escape into books." And you give people permission for being broken, for being that misfit toy type of thing. And I think that's why we like those as opposed to those posts where, oh, I had the best month of my life. I signed up 15 clients and I bought a new car and I'm going to on a cruise. We don't want to read those because they just make us feel less than. So when we read posts about how people overcame something and they're really, really vulnerable, we can relate to that because we're cheering them on and we're thinking to ourselves, maybe I can do that too.
Walk me through that vulnerability, how to step into it, how to hold space for it, and how to share while you're in it, feeling vulnerable and exposed.
So the key is, and first of all, read a lot of Brene Brown books because she is the queen of vulnerability, and she really talks about how to let go of shame because a lot of us carry shame in our life, and how to be okay with that. But the important thing, and this is what I learned through reading Brene Brown's books, is we always have to share from the scar and not the wound. So you have to make sure that whenever you're being vulnerable, that it's something that it kind of like no longer affects you. It's like a cut. It's like it's scabbed over. I hate that word scab, but it's a really vivid word where it's like it's protected. Once you have a scab on a cut, then it's like if you dropped water on it, it doesn't hurt. You don't feel anything. You're just kind of waiting for it to like do its thing and, totally go away. And that's what we have to do when we're being vulnerable. So I can only share things that I feel I've already healed. There's a scab, there's a scab on it. It's okay. If that thing is still open, I don't share. So anything that I'm still working through, it's still emotionally too hard for me. That is vulnerability, and those are my boundaries, and I don't want to share that. But something that I've already worked through, and I think telling others could help them, then I'm okay. So that's my decision tree with vulnerability, and always just thinking, could this help somebody else? And do I feel better for having shared it? Because in the end, when I did that post, as much as I was nervous, I was really just nervous because would people think less of me knowing this? Because it was just something I hadn't shared before. And in actuality, people were applauding me for being being so honest.
That's one thing that I was thinking of. I feel like in that vulnerability, if we get too self-centered, or we focus too much on ourselves, then it's very hard to share because it does feel like you're exposed. You might be judged. You might be laughed at, whatever might be the case. But I think if we find a bigger purpose into that vulnerability of me feeling this way, probably somebody else is staying silent and they don't have that chance to actually feel connected or feel less alone. And with me sharing this story, it makes me feel exposed, but it might help somebody feel connected or less alone in this world, in whatever is the challenge that they're going through. So I feel like sometimes adding more of that like bigger purpose than ourselves into that sharing might help. But it's good that you shared about the importance of like don't share the wounds because that's where it can re-traumatize you. It actually can make it worse depending on the reaction. And especially online, whatever you put out there, you have no control of what will be the response. And even the people that are the closest to you, even with that, a lot of times we need to be careful. Like, are they actually a safe space to share this? So that's very important to distinguish like which one is which. But it is something that I like literally today when I had a conversation with that friend, he told me, share more of the content that is vulnerable. And I'm like, okay.
Baby
And
steps.
exactly. And that's where I said I'm curious to explore that because I have experienced it in my life when I share more vulnerable stuff. One, people can connect with me more, or they can resonate more, but also I think it's very easy nowadays online for people to assume that you're not human or get in that mindset of, oh, easy for you to say. You have like you have this discipline, you have this, you have that. And then with that, they don't get a chance to see in themselves that, oh, she's also just a person. If she can do it, I also can do it. So I think even with sharing some of the human side of us, which I don't think I'm not necessarily like not sharing it. It's just that I haven't really been mindful about like I'm pretty vulnerable or sharing on podcasts. Like I try to put some stories in and things like that. Um, but it was interesting because he would tell me like share more of the vulnerable stuff and I felt inside I'm like no anything but that. It's like it doesn't feel good, but at the same time that's where people actually connect with us, and I know that it's the same for me when somebody shares something and they're vulnerable. I actually appreciate it, and
Mm,
because I know how hard that is, and also it gives me a chance to connect with them at a very different level. So it's very interesting, kind of how we work through these things where we have these assumptions about sharing and what will be the reaction, which a lot of it does come from our like childhoods and protective mechanisms and all those things. But once we actually start to share more and be more vulnerable, I feel like that's where we actually start to like really connect.
yes. Yes. And it's the same with like if you have a friendship or if you're in a romantic relationship. It's like you start off as strangers and then there's like a level of trust building. And I think that sharing your vulnerable moments that you're okay with sharing. Again, we should do it in baby steps, and sometimes there's too much information. You need to tell people the show your dirty laundry. You can just show your laundry basket type of thing. But I know, like, even when you're starting a friendship with somebody, it's like you get along, you have fun, you meet for coffee, you like to maybe go to the theater or different things. And then slowly you share a little story, and then they share a little story. And it's just kind of, you slowly kind of say, okay, I'm letting you see behind the curtain, not just what I show to the world. I'm letting you into my world. But we have to do it in small increments. And if it was one-sided, and if you and I were friends and every time we met, I told you something, but I knew nothing about you. I just knew the public side and you never told me anything. It would feel like a very I would start to go, I don't know if maybe we're not as close friends because you use that friend, close friends, as I thought we were because she never shares with me. So it's like, so maybe you don't trust me. And I think that vulnerability builds trust when we let people know, hey, you know what? I was a little nervous doing this. I've always told people when I do lives that it's like before I hit the go button when I go live, I'm scared out of my mind. I've always been scared out of my mind because anything can happen and I can't control everything. And I've done things and I've screwed up and I've done lives with no microphone and all sorts of stupid things. And I know that this can happen. And I remember once somebody said, if you are a live streamer, you're not supposed to tell people that you get scared. And I said, well, who wrote that rule? Who wrote that rule that we're not supposed to do this? And I think that's another thing that holds us back, that it's like, well, if I tell people that, I have these vulnerabilities, will somebody say, well, then I don't want to work with her? And it's like, in reality, well, if I told you this and you don't want to work with me, then I'm not the right person for you to work with anyways. So we have to not be so afraid that we have to look perfect because we're not perfect. We're imperfectly perfect. We're not perfect at all. We're just progressing. And so vulnerability builds trust. And I think it's important.
I love what you're saying about the thought of perfection doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily equal to authority. I have example with the coaching work that I did. There was one lady that I worked with, and once we finished our work, I always try to ask like feedback, how was the experience, and things like that, so that I can learn and get better, and also learn what actually is working or helping. And I remember she said that I really like that it doesn't feel like you're talking down on me. It feels like we're
Mm.
equals. And I'm like, huh, interesting. Tell me more. Because my assumption would be, well, for me to be perceived as an expert, I need to be higher. I need to have my shit together. I need to like, everything is like, like everything is perfect. I know my stuff. I'm living my stuff. It's like, but in the sessions that we would have, I would share things like from my experience or things that I would have gone through myself. And she said that actually it was very helpful because it didn't feel like you were like preaching on me. And I felt
Mm.
like I can relate to you. And I was asking her, did that get in your way of seeing me as like authority within like what we were working on? And she was like, no, not at all. It actually just helped me to feel kind of like less alone in the whole thing. And I was like, huh, very interesting. And then I start to think about, because the other example I have is when I was starting to post content as a coach, I was like this like serious videos of like, this is how you change your mindset. But I was like serious, and I'm like step one, and I'm just like saying all the things. And I remember there was this one day when one of my friends said, "You're actually funny." Like I said something or whatever, and we were like laughing, and he was like, "You're actually like really funny," and I'm like, "Huh?" And I had this light bulb moment where I was like, when I'm with my clients, a lot of times we're having fun. We're getting work done, but we're also having fun. When I'm with my friends, a lot of times I'm having fun. When I show up online, I'm like, I have to be the serious person because this is business. And it was very interesting realization that I was like, I suppressed this part of me that people probably like a lot about me. And it's one of the reasons why they keep coming back, because I make like self-development, self-work, it's not easy. It doesn't feel good. But it doesn't mean that we can't have fun along the way, or we can't laugh at ourselves and kind of embrace our humanness. And it was interesting realization that I was like, I had this idea that I had to be this like serious person because that's what business people do. They're serious people. And then I realized like, that's not who I am at all. I don't even want to be that person. But I
Mm.
had this idea that like, this is how I'm supposed to be. And it's kind of back to that, like, what's the perfect way to be, like for you to be perceived this way or that way, or to be perceived as an expert. In reality, you just have to know your stuff.
Mm. That's true. That's true. And the personalities are so important. And I think in this age of AI that we're in, I know a lot of people are making these coaching avatars where it's like, instead of working with Gillian, the real Gillian, I could take all my knowledge and stick it into some sort of AI agent, and then you could go work with my AI agent. But you know what? I love using AI, but AI doesn't have any personality. It just churns out whatever you want. It does a really good job. It's a great workhorse for you, but it's not the same as a human being. And so if you think about it, in this age of AI, we should lean more into our humanity because that is what makes us different. That's what would make it different working with you versus somebody else, because you may have the same amount of information. And so I could be sitting here going, okay, I don't know whether to work with them or them. They both know their stuff. But the thing is that if I see your personality, I'd say, I want to spend time with her. She's fun. She's interesting. When work should always be fun. If it's not fun, then like, why do it? Really, it's like we only have so many hours on this planet. So we should be enjoying them and working with people that bring out the best in us, that make the time go by where you're just like, holy cow, how did 40 minutes go by? We just had so much fun talking together. Imagine if I was showed up here today and it wasn't an interesting conversation and we weren't able to kind of go off topic here and go off topic there. That would be boring.
Yeah, and not just for us alone. Before I ask you the last question, where can people connect with you, learn about you, and what you do?
LinkedIn. That's my number one place, and the reason why I like LinkedIn over any other social media platform is because LinkedIn is about connecting with people and having relationships. And you do that through your posts, you do that through everything. You can have instant messages. That's how you and I met. We just met on LinkedIn, and it can create just a wonderful ripple effect. So come find me on LinkedIn. I have an open profile, which means anybody can send me a message. If you're interested in, connecting with me, I connect with people. You can follow me if you want to follow me, whatever. I'm not an influencer, so I don't really care about that. So just connect with me or send me a message that you saw this podcast or heard this podcast and you'd like to continue the conversation.
Love it. So last question I have for you. What is one piece of wisdom you're still learning to live?
Sorry, say that again.
What is one piece of wisdom you're still learning to live?
Probably, uh, don't waste time. Don't waste time. I'm at that over 50 age where all of a sudden you have more looking in the rear window than you have looking forward, and recognizing that we have a limited amount of time on the planet. And so there's things that I want to do that I still put off to next year, and I need to take action more. I need to go through every single day and say, did I at least do one thing? Don't waste time, because time is ticking and we can't afford to waste time. So that is my biggest thing that I am trying to do right now, not waste any time.
Well, Gillian, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. It was a great conversation. And I definitely got a lot out of it, a lot of thinking points, a lot of golden nuggets. And to all of the listeners, if you're an expert with 20 plus years of experience and you want to share your wisdom, there'll be details below how you can apply. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode.